The Pentagon said today that U.S. and allied troops in the Gulf now outnumber Iraqi troops in and around Kuwait by 135,000. The Pentagon also said Iraqi troops continue to expand their front lines westward, making them longer in the front line, which will make it more difficult for allied forces to outflank them. The U.S. Navy has now moved 2 of its 6 aircraft carriers in the region into the Persian Gulf itself, so their planes are closer to targets in Kuwait and Iraq. The other 4 are tonight in the Red Sea. American Air Force and Marine pilots were stepping up their drills in Saudi Arabia today, as well as elsewhere in the Gulf. Here's ABC's Jim Hickey.
The alert status at this Persian Gulf airbase went up a couple of notches today. Jet fighters stand ready to launch an attack. Ladders down for quick pilot access, canopy covers off. The final bombs and missiles were loaded. It takes several men to attach this Sparrow air-to-air missile on an FA-18 Hornet. No one had the day off today. Ground crews are working 12-hour shifts 7 days a week. There is certainly no let-up in the number of sorties, the number of combat air patrols launched from here. If anything, they have increased today. Pilots say the skies over the Persian Gulf were crowded with Allied warplanes today. No unusual signs of Iraqi fighters, though. Marine pilots like Alex Wilkins of Atlanta already know what their targets will be.
Most of us have several missions, and we've practiced all of those.
Wilkins, like so many others have said so many times, is tired of the waiting. But until that order to launch for real comes through, there is just no other choice. This is Jim Hickey with the 3rd Marine Air Wing in the Persian Gulf.
As this deadline approaches tonight, here are 2 challenges for the U.S. to fight again with a generation of American troops, the vast majority of whom have never been in combat, and to fight with a new generation of American weapons, which have never been tested in battle. ABC's Bill Redeker is in Saudi Arabia.
At a forward military base today, artillerymen said the Army's most sophisticated air defense system was put on higher alert. The radar-guided, computer-driven Patriot missile system was developed to intercept and shoot down incoming aircraft and missiles like the Iraqi Scuds.
If Scuds are launched at us or if hostile aircraft come at us, we're ready. Then we can launch and lock in and shoot down enemy targets.
But the Patriots have never been to war, and because they cost $500,000 each, these men have test-fired them only twice.
It's never been tested on an actual Scud missile, only on a simulation. We knocked it down, and we feel that when the real thing comes through, we can knock that down too.
Another weapon yet to be battle-tested, Apache attack helicopters designed to destroy tanks. Today, they were loaded with Hellfire missiles. Mechanics say despite earlier problems with filters and rotor blades, the Apache is now fit to fly.
I think it's capable of showing the taxpayer they got their money's worth.
So what was the biggest concern today?
My personal feeling, and we are prepared for this, is that he's going to launch some sort of preemptive strike. I feel that, yeah.
So concern here tonight is focused on defense, being ready if in the next several hours Iraq should launch a first strike. Peter?
Bill, a question tonight about attitude. You've been there for most of the 5.5 months since the build-up began. Do you see any real change in American forces on this evening?
Well, there's a lot of deja vu. When they arrived here in August, they were on a very high state of alert because at that time they thought Saudi Arabia might be invaded by the Iraqis. Then they went through this trough or this low-level period which almost seemed like an exercise, and now they've gone right back up again because indeed they could be the victims of a preemptive strike or they could initiate the attack.
There was always a lot of talk about kicking the butt of the enemy with great ease. Any change in attitude towards the Iraqi army?
I think there's a bit more respect for them as they hear more about their weapons system, certainly the number of soldiers and the amount of frontline artillery and tanks that they had. So I think their attitude has changed considerably.
Okay, Bill Redeker in Saudi Arabia tonight. Thank you. You heard Bill mention in his report the possibility of a preemptive strike by Iraq, or at least some American soldiers there thought so. That is something also very much on the minds of Israeli military leaders. ABC's Dean Reynolds.
The firepower is in place across the country. A good part of the Israeli Air Force is in the air at all times. Israel is prepared for an Iraqi missile attack. Such an attack and the certain Israeli retaliation is seen here as Saddam Hussein's only serious hope of cracking Arab support for the U.S.-led coalition against him. And since Israel has agreed not to attack unless it has been attacked, an Iraqi missile could be launched and could well get through. Giant American cargo planes recently delivered Patriot defense systems to Israel, but they are not yet operational.
You can't stop those missiles in the air. It takes 4 minutes before it hits somewhere in Israel.
Israelis traditionally plan for the worst. The specter of a missile attack with chemical weapons has people carrying their gas masks at lunchtime. In Tel Aviv, which Saddam Hussein says is his #1 target, school children are getting into the act with play masks, as if to make the real thing seem not so scary. It is early Wednesday morning here, and the latest word from Israeli military officials is that they detect no unusual activity at the Iraqi missile sites. Peter?
Dean, trying to monitor the Israeli mood from here is difficult, but one senses that the country is reasonably calm.
They are, Peter. There is apprehension, of course, because they have been threatened by Saddam, but there is confidence. They have been through these kinds of threats before. Their kids were in school today. People were out shopping in the streets of Jerusalem. There was even a wedding up the street a couple of hours ago. Perhaps the best sign of confidence, though, is that the Tel Aviv stock market has been on a roll and on the rise for 3 straight days.
And do Israelis also sense that one of their most deeply felt adversaries is about to get it?
That's true, Peter. I think that behind all of the apprehension is a certain amount of satisfaction that the man they wanted to see go away is going to go away at the hands of the United States.
Okay, Dean Reynolds, thank you very much indeed. Since the invasion of Kuwait last August, King Hussein of Jordan, who lives not too far from where Dean Reynolds was standing, has been trying to find a diplomatic solution acceptable to the Arab world. It's been very difficult for him. As recently as last week, he was making another diplomatic round of European capitals. Tonight, he is back home in Jordan, preparing for war. ABC's John Donvan is in Amman.
Jordan's King Hussein has never sounded so resigned to war. Its specter is all around us, he told the nation on television. We will spare nothing, he said, in defending our nation. As the king spoke, his army was already at its highest state of alert. These tanks were moving tonight in eastern Jordan. But in the last few weeks, Jordan has concentrated most of its troops in the other direction, facing Israel, fearing that if the Israelis are drawn into war, they will try to reach Iraq through Jordanian territory. Tonight, Jordanian television broadcast its latest installment on how to survive an attack, to help control the fear that has been setting in over the last few days. Tonight, Jordanians and Palestinians lit candles 2 hours before midnight Jordan time. They set out on a vigil for peace, but the chants were defiant as they set out from the same offices where last August so many had signed up to fight for Saddam Hussein. In his speech, the king vowed that Jordan will defend against its enemies. Most take that to mean Israel. Between Iraq and the U.S., he remains officially neutral, a position he staked out when the crisis began, but which may not keep him out of war. John Donvan, ABC News, Amman.
The Egyptian president also went on television tonight to make a final appeal to Saddam Hussein. Hosni Mubarak called on Hussein to answer, as he put it, one word: peace. Mubarak said the impending war could be the most dangerous event for humanity since the Second World War. In a moment, heightened security for Americans.